Hey, Mary, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun. At least I hope it is.
I have yet to see us have a conversation, even when we're talking about difficult things, that isn't fun and that I don't learn something from. So I'm just glad you're here.
Well, it's a
Oh,
pleasure. And for me, a lot of it is, I say that, but I don't say it lightly. So I'm kind of being facetious about this, but like, I love being in conversation and like the joy of the creation in the conversation. So that's what I'm especially excited about being in this call with you for, because, we get to have fun conversations all the time, but now we get to share it.
oh, to be a fly on the wall. So, Mary, how do we know each other?
Well, let's see. Okay, let me go back. So we know each other because Matt Schutte maybe introduced you to Arthur, and then
Yes.
somebody sent me your name or your LinkedIn, and then I think I just connected with you immediately. And then we just got to know each other at DWeb Camp. I think that's the primary way, right?
It is, and it's one of those fascinating chains of connections. So I was introduced to the first guest on the inaugural episode of this podcast, Mark Curtis, by one of my former PwC colleagues, Patrick Welsh. Patrick said, "You need to meet Mark." So I got to meet Mark. And then Mark said, within maybe 10 minutes of our conversation, "You need to talk to my friend Matt Schutte. He lives down the street from me here in Puerto Rico."
Yes.
And I said, "Well, I guess I have to talk to Matt Schutte." And about 10 minutes into my conversation with Matt, again, this is all over Zoom, and it was pandemic times, tail end of the restricted nature of nobody being able to go anywhere. Matt said, "I really think Arthur's going to want to talk to you." I said, "Well, that sounds great." And then about 15 minutes into my first conversation with Arthur, which was the next day, he asked me what I was doing in about 10 days. And I said, "Well, I don't really have anything blocking me on the calendar." And he said, "Great, you're coming camping with us." I didn't own a tent. I had never spent a night in the woods in my life. So I
Yes.
went to REI dutifully. I acquired a tent. I attempted to assemble it in our living room. By the way, not a great place to assemble a tent. And my Eagle Scout husband is looking at me like, "I believe in you, sweetheart." And I'm just thinking, oh my, well, you know where the insurance paperwork is. We'll be fine. And yes, I arrived at DWeb Camp, and moments after I went past registration and got my name tag, I was introduced to you. And I just remember our first conversation. It was supposed to just sort of be meet and greet, and the next thing I knew, we were together in the dinner buffet line, and then we were sitting down at dinner, and then we were making plans to have breakfast. And it was wonderful to meet a kindred spirit and also someone for whom there is so much joy in discovery and problem solving. So that's how I remember our first meeting, and it's been a joy since.
It was wild. Like what I recall was a moment. It really wasn't a moment. It was probably an hour standing up after one of the talks that we had gone to, where finally you were sort of like, "Well, let me give you the lowdown of who I am and what I've been up to for the last 20 years." And I was like, "Whoa, okay." And it was like, "Oh my God, really? Wow, that's intimidating. Okay, great. What do you want to do with me?" It was really fun.
Eh, That's kind of funny to me because to me it was exactly that, but in reverse. It was meeting someone who had been such a pioneer in the space of decentralized web technology when it was still just a thought, who had been on the cutting edge of trying to figure out, how do we work in this new world in a way that is commercial, that is human centered, and that also deals with this incredible regulatory tangle that we have, because for so long there was no guidance in terms of what you could do, what you couldn't do, where you could do it. And here you were out out in front.
Hmm. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey over so many years with so many changes in those areas. But I think from the very beginning, since I got involved with this, and just to be really clear, I've known Arthur for 30 years, so I've been involved in multiple businesses with him and created or worked to create models of business that could do something just a little bit different, right? And just a little bit more for the people and just a little bit more oriented towards having it work better in society. That this has just been a constant. And some of that has included various forms of currency work over the years as well. Some of it was more community currency back in the day. And then, after things started shifting and crypto became this thing that was building up a little bit more of a mainstream awareness, it started looking at, well, what other forms of this could actually make a difference. Anyway, for me, the place that I always fit in was like, yeah, but we got to operate in this particular world that we're living in today, this real structured world where you have all the regulations of how to run businesses in a different particular jurisdiction, how to do taxes, how to like follow all the legal procedural regulations, everything. And then how do you blend that? How do you actually have one foot there and then this other, your other foot basically in this future possibility vision and creating something that has never been, that would shift context into an entirely different frame of reference, essentially, for how we can be together, how we can operate both with technology and structurally together. And this is a weird place to sort of land, but it's kind of been what I try to do in most of the roles that I'm in. I'm always pushing the envelope in one way and sort of like saying, yeah, but we have to manage it according to the rules on the other, on the other hand. So it's a fun experience. At least for me, it suits.
And that is a lot of how I think about you as someone who is capable of living in paradox. You're capable of holding things in tension in a way that I find a lot of other folks struggle with because there is cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
How can two things that are seemingly contradictory be true at the same time? How can we make things more human while at the same time embracing even more technology? How can we live in a space where we are forging completely new rules and new economics, new ways of doing business, new ways of interacting, at the same time existing in a regulatory framework that has persisted for quite some time? And your ability to hold those things in tension and to see a path forward, to me, comes down to how you keep human beings at the center, and how what I've seen you do in the projects that we've worked on together, both in the holochain ecosystem, as co-founders in VizVer, and now seeing you step into your role as founder in Cirdia, is that you are focused on solving really human, really practical problems that you have experience with. So you're not solving something that's theoretical. You're not solving something for someone else. All of these things are deeply personal to you. So I'm just really curious, what's driving you forward right now? What are you most excited about that you're working on?
Well, I'd have to say right now, the work in Cirdia is the thing that is the passion project, and it is the thing I most want to birth into the world, essentially. And what Cirdia is privacy first wellness wearables. So we're talking about fitness devices. We're talking about doing something that is not being done because it's goes against the sort of normal practice of collecting data. In this day and age, what we have is all of these companies around the world that basically, whether you're doing social media, whether you're doing health and wellness, whether you're doing almost anything, it's a platform built to collect data. And the problem with this in this space, and I'll kind of I'll tell you where it all got started, was over the years with Holochain, we would have these AMAs where people would ask me, what do you want to see built on holochain technology? Well, holochain technology is peer-to-peer. Holochain technology basically has your data always be sovereign to yourself, and then you share it when you as you choose. You always have the say about how to share it and with whom to share it. And so for me, the obvious answer has always been health tech, health data, wellness data. That's been my answer over and over and over. But there never were a lot of projects that were popping up in this area. And then at some point, I was just like, oh, I know when this point was. Google basically acquired Fitbit several years back, and then they were making it so that all your data was going to go into the Google space. And I'm just like, I can't keep, I've been wearing a Fitbit. I love getting some of the things, some of the information out of it. I kept seeing possibilities for it that it wasn't doing. But yet I felt cringy, basically, wearing one, knowing that I'm doing, I basically had to think long and hard because I got it to be able to work with a trainer at distance during COVID, like you were saying. And I loved everything that I got from it, but I hated that it was throwing my data into centralized repository. I hated that I was dependent, especially after they were acquired on the Google, systems and algorithms. And basically, that was just like a no-go. At some point, I was like, I can't keep doing this. And so, yeah, you're right. I build it for me. I am the first part of the market, and I was the first validation of the market. But by no means am I the end of the validation. I mean, there's so many other reasons why this is needed now in a day and age, in the U.S. especially, where Roe v. Wade is not something we can count on anymore. Women were dropping the use of apps. They were dropping the use of devices because they couldn't count on their data being secure. They couldn't count on their data being private. They couldn't count on that this wasn't going to basically be an issue for them at some point in their life if they made decisions that somebody around the world didn't like or somebody in their jurisdiction didn't like. And that was like whoa, this needs to be happening now. And I was researching everybody else. I have the podcast Terms of Service. And so it's always been right on my mind that we agree to so many things without really knowing what it means. And so I went and downloaded and literally analyzed all the terms of service that I could find for wearables. And they're awful. They're just flat out awful. And it just was such an obvious gap. You have to start doing this with hardware first, because every single thing out there starts with collecting data and then immediately integrating with basically 6 or so primary data collectors in the world. We're talking about the Apples, the Googles, the Huawei's, the, Samsungs, that basically if you've got, even if you don't have one of their personalized devices, almost every device connects with these main, there's like there's about 4 or 6 of them in the world, into these main data sets. And all of it's put in there. It's crazy. And I was just like, too far, too long. I want something different. I want technology that supports me in this way, but I don't want to be part of the problem. I want to solve this problem. And so that was the birth of Cirdia a little over a year ago. So that's what I'm most excited about. And we've got lots going on there, but yeah, crazy stuff.
Yes, you have lots going on. So you touched on Cirdia. You also touched on the podcast Terms of Service, which is outstanding and has had numerous of our mutual friends and acquaintances on it. And it's something else that I learn something new from every time. Oh. I want to go back to something you said that was really interesting to me about, first, when Google purchased Fitbit. And then secondarily, the concern that more and more women in the United States have had about menstrual data being available to corporations and not having clarity or trust around how that data is secured, how it's stored, how it's shared, who even owns it. And that was brought home for us, I think, in a major way when 23andMe declared bankruptcy. And the next thing you knew, millions of people had their DNA on the auction block to pay off the debts of a corporation. And you start to think about like the fundamental building blocks of what makes us human beings is up for sale in the market. And history does not take kindly to how how human beings have been treated in a market context. And so I think about that at the same time that I think about what I think more people are waking up to as an outdated narrative around I have nothing to hide, so it doesn't matter to me that the data is out there.
Right.
And the thing is, it doesn't matter. It's not about whether I have something to hide or not. If everything is based around the assumption that we as humans are a threat, we as humans are inherently bad, and we're inherently criminal, women would be inherently criminal. I have nothing to hide. That's not the point. The point is that privacy is normal. And we're taught that from childhood. Like
Right.
so much in our lives is just normally private. And I'm curious, as you have gone into the market, and one of the many, many things I adore about you is just your commitment to data, your commitment to user voice, your commitment to research. I'm curious, how are you seeing these narratives in the market? How are you seeing them in your own research as you're developing your brand message and promise for Cirdia?
Well, I want to say a couple of things first, and then I'll jump back to and remind me to jump back to the marketing and the brand and what people are really saying, because there's so much juicy stuff there. But I want to add on to the part that you were talking about. Yeah, Fitbit got purchased by Google, and we had already sort of had this experience of Google used to be this company that was sort of like do no evil. That was their motto, right? But that was their motto, what, in the 90s? That was their motto in the early 2000s. I don't think people, well, we know it's not their motto now, but we noticed a lessening of that over time. And I liken this to the same concept that has been made quite, interesting and written about in blogs by people that we love to follow. The enshittification of companies and really the enshittification of platforms. The thing about this is that it's it's so bad right now. The Meta just lost a jury trial in California. I wrote about this one about a week ago or so, basically on a data protection case where it was their SDK that was being used by Flow, which is a menstrual app. So we're going right back into the heart of what you were talking about just a few minutes ago. This stuff people do expect to be private because they brought a class action up against Flow. They were using SDKs and basically the way that they wrote their code, it didn't matter that the actual data in the app wasn't being shared directly because the SDKs were so explicit about the kinds of patterns of things that were being collected that the metadata could tell exactly when somebody was like putting a particular kind of tracking information for themselves about when their period started or when something else started and what they were collecting. And this was going this was going to Meta's SDK. This was going into another analytics companies. I can't Flutter, I think it was, and also Google. Well, Flutter went out of business. I believe related to this, they settled for like $3.5 million. Google settled. No one told us how much that they settled for. Flow ended up settling the day before the case, completed, and Meta decided to go all the way to a jury trial on it, and they lost because normal people said, that's not okay. People should and can expect privacy for their data. And luckily, California has a data protection law. Most states in the United States do not protect anybody's data. And what it recognizes by calling it data protection is it's actually that it belongs to the people who are putting it in. And that it starts with the person and it stays with the person. And that's the beginning and the end of it. And what you're talking about, our expectations about privacy from childhood to now, of course we have it. We like to think that when some people have more of it than others, right? Some people don't like to talk about money. Some people don't like to talk about, certain types of things. We have ideas that certain bodily functions are private, right? I mean, like we are definitely growing up in a culture thinking that there is this thing called privacy and that what is known about us, there's areas of it that should be able to be kept under wraps in some ways. And the age of the internet has sort of like cracked that open and made it almost impossible in some ways. And a lot of it has been by choice, right? Where people will share what they're having for breakfast instead of that being something that they just do in their kitchen in the morning, right? But it's crazy. Just because somebody chooses to share it doesn't make the fundamental of it that it's private until they do. And that if they share it in one context doesn't mean that they choose to share it in another context. And that is just so critical. And we've had very little sort of depth of conversation, it seems like, around this, because in the U.S., when it comes to law and privacy, it's very, very different. We don't have great privacy laws in general. We have privacy expectations, and that's about it. So it's only where we're starting to see privacy being put into law, which we had a little bit with Roe v. Wade, or at least that's the interpretation that we had with Roe v. Wade. But with that coming down, it breaks it down not just for women and not just in the cases related to abortion or women's bodies, but it actually breaks it down even more because that was one of the holding case law arguments for privacy in the United States. So I think it's actually even more problematic. But for me, with Cirdia, I'm sort of focusing something in an area where I think people fundamentally care. And that's what I call about their intimate body data. I think people have an ooh factor when it comes to inadvertently sharing intimate body data, whether that's, how your heartbeat is working, whether that's your like the sort of movements you do with your body, your gait, the sort of, like I think people even in the VR space, there was brought up a lot of conversations like, but if they know how I move my entire body because they can track everything that I'm doing, it just makes me be, like I can be mimicked like quickly, easily. And there's so much legal aspect of this that comes up, and you see it, with voices and people using voiceovers that are trying to mimic other people's voices. I think there was a case with one of the actresses in LA not too long ago in this that she won. I'm terrible with names, so I'm not going to try to say it, but she was in an action film. I'll just say that. Anyway, this is important stuff when it comes to the parts of people that they relate to as this is fundamentally of me, about me, in a way that defines me. Oof, it starts to get very personal. And I think that's exactly why the 23andMe DNA data was just such a kind of fear-based thing. Like you say, our sequences are on the marketplace. This thing that points to our patterns as a human being are up for sale to big business. Oof, that frightens people.
As well it should. Something that okay, so one, we are going to get back to the whole market and brand thing for a second, but I want to pick up on something that you've been talking about before we circle back to that, which is going back to something we talked about before around structure and framework, and even getting to the point of legal entities. Yeah. And there was another podcast episode I saw recently. It was Wearables, Revolution.social podcast. Their first guest when they launched the podcast was Jack Dorsey. And Jack was talking about the decision that he had to make when he was CEO at Twitter about banning Donald Trump from the platform. Mm-hmm. And the way he explained it, I really appreciated, because it actually harkened back to what my PhD dissertation research was about, which is how leaders in for-profit U.S. corporations and publicly traded companies in particular, how they practice ethical leadership when they're being asked to be these moral integrators, when they're being asked to, again, live in this tension between stated organizational culture, values, ethics, their own personal morals, ethics, and values, yep, and fiduciary responsibility to shareholder. But when you think about those tensions and having to hold that together, the thing that Jack reflected on is that as the CEO of a publicly traded company, he had a legal obligation to the shareholders. And so in his role, to make the right decision from a legal perspective would force the wrong decision from the internet's perspective.
Right.
And having to live in this very difficult space. And I wonder, how does that play into how you have structured Cirdia?
I love it, and thank you for asking this, because this is key to getting this right. I think that tension has been so hard for leaders over the past several decades in the United States. I mean, essentially, as the expectations around what it takes to what it is for an investor to put in money and then a company to go IPO and for them to make, unicorn type extraction uh, gains on something like that. As the expectations have gone up over the decades, and the speed of building big companies has just gotten so rapid, it has transformed what it means to lead a company, especially a public company. And so for us, this is kind of the thing that I've been distinguishing, and it's been a work in progress. But as we got to the point where we knew what we wanted to do from the perspective of stakeholders. So from the beginning, we said we want to be a different kind of company. So we found a state, Colorado, where we could incorporate as a public benefit corporation. So out of the gate, we're starting saying, hey, stakeholders matter. We have a purpose. We have a duty, a legal duty to stakeholders, not just to shareholders. And to have that sort of baked in at a legal level for an entity is just, it's such a relief, because then for me as the leader, I'm not weighing whether or not I'm doing my legal duty when I'm pulled to do what the internet or what the people really need, because I can count the people in as the stakeholders, and now I have to balance it, but legally I'm supposed to balance it. So that's the first answer, the first kind of big part of this. But the problem with that is that it doesn't end with how you instantiate an organization if you're trying to build something and scale something, right? Because how do you do that? Well, you start a company, maybe you invest some of your own money into it, but if it's a software or a hardware and software kind of company like Cirdia is, you usually need some extra money to grow and scale. So then you start looking at, okay, great, how do I get investors? So this is the stage that Cirdia is in now, and we're just starting to kind of go and have these conversations. And we've really had to work hard to put together a narrative and also structures that will deliver on basically our promise to our stakeholders. Because privacy, in the end, is actually not really the problem, it's governance. And so by asking about the structure, you're hitting it right on the nail. Because what do we do if we take investment and the investors want to exit? And in order to exit, you either have to go public or you have to sell the company to somebody else. Because that's the expectation now. So we said, well, that doesn't work. We have to have a way to maintain the governance, basically the commitment to the shareholder and the commitment to the stakeholder as we move through this entire process of scaling the organization. So our choice really was to look ahead and go, well, how could we do a community exit? How can we actually get investment money now, but how can we ensure that 5 years, 6 years, 7 years down the line, we're paying back those investors in appropriate ways but also simultaneously ensuring that our governance is going to be respected, that our governance is going to continue supporting and prioritizing stakeholder value. So we said, basically, well, employees want it, and we can create a consumer or a hybrid co-op, because then the stakeholders and the employees are actually the owners of the organization. They ensure that the company remains mission-driven. So that's our answer to it. There's a whole lot more meat on the bone when it comes to how we're putting together term sheets, how we're, creating tax advantageous scenarios for investors, those sorts of things. But essentially, you have to start with governance and the entity problem, because if you don't begin in the right place, it's almost impossible to shift back into a structure that allows you, that legally holds you and binds you to balancing both shareholder and other stakeholders simultaneously.
There's so much in that I want to dig into, starting with the whole issue I keep running into around this sort of regulatory nihilism that I think I encounter primarily in spaces related to decentralized technology, whether it is cryptocurrency, it's blockchain. It's folks who have tried to figure out what the rules are and found that there either were no rules or the rules were contradictory. And they sort of came to the conclusion of, we're just going to get in trouble no matter what. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. And also the space of those who go in as very intentional as you have to say, look, this is the framework that we have. This is the guidance that we have. How do we construct what we want to see with the guardrails and the rules that we have in place now? And what is it that we need to do to evolve the system to work for humans into the future? So there's a whole bit there to dig into, but I'm going to set that aside for a moment. And because I know we could just go on about that. I do want to come back to market and brand. Yeah. Because you've been so intentional. You've done so much research, which makes my research self so happy. How have you gone about your research? What have you learned? And what is Cirdia's message to the market?
Oh, yeah. So first of all, I just want to say I lucked out really early and got an intro to somebody, Corinne, who is on our team and is working in the space of doing our market testing and our ads and really supporting the full on lead process. But she starts it at the very, very top. And what we did, this was probably back in January, February, I think we started all this, maybe February. We started with what is called just rapid market testing. And what we did was we went and looked at everything we're already saying. We already had a premise. We already had some ideas. We had already sort of done focus groups. We'd talked to people. We'd been out there. We'd gotten tons of validation, like just from in the way that isn't data, right? And what we did is we took all that content and we shared it with Corinne, and she went out and said, well, let's test some stuff. Let's see what people like. Let's see what they don't like. Let's see what they click on. Let's see what they don't click on. And for next to nothing, I mean, like very little spend, suddenly we were getting all this information about, well, what do people care about? Oh, they care about, they responded really, really, really well. I mean, I'll kind of get to the end of it because it's an iterative process where you go through it. But what was so shocking is that almost everything we were saying is important to us. Every piece of data that we put in front of people got a good response. And a good response means it's really, really, really inexpensive to put an ad out that somebody will click on. Some of these click-ons were just like, click if you like it, say yes, say no. I mean, survey type clicks, right, on these things. But you're asking somebody to take an action online, and that's not insignificant. So we got all this data back, and what we found was that women really, we first of all, we found that women and women over 45 especially were responsive to a lot of our messages, which was great because I already knew I was building something because I wanted it and I'm a woman over 45. So there we go. But anyway, some of the biggest things was that women didn't want to be sold out by their tech. They didn't want a wearable. They didn't want a device. They didn't want a wellness device that was going to sell them out. That was like the language that it really landed. And I think there's something really interesting there because not everybody is as techie as I am. Not everybody knows exactly what's happening under the hood. Not everybody reads every one of the terms of service for all of these things. And yet they have a sense that something's not right. They have a sense that they're being sold out. They don't know exactly how or why, but they know it, and they know it's not great, and they know it's all of these platforms on the internet that are doing it, and they know it's all these people that build all these things and sell it to them. And why do they know it? Because when they click on one thing, they get ads for something, and starts to get a little queasy and like, ooh, now clearly they know that about me. And you get this feeling of being known. So that was one of the biggest things that people responded to. But oddly enough, they responded a lot to some other things that really surprised us. Now, I would say it surprised us, but mostly it surprised me in the way that how they responded to it. Women in particular are just so sick of silicone devices, like silicone bands, sweaty bands, bands that don't look like they're something that they want to wear with the clothes that they wear, bands that don't suit them. And that was just such an interesting thing to learn, because one of the things we had decided is that, we're building small, we're building like made to look good. I want to wear like something that looks like a watch, something that has me feel good when I'm dressed up to go to work or dressed up to go out to a nice dinner. I wanted something that was going to feel great, but that's not really great for night. So we ended up with a 2-device system where we have a day device and a night device. The night device has got, the soft cozy band, and it doesn't have a display, so it's not keeping you up when you're supposed to be sleeping, that sort of thing. But it was just so amazing because we got immediate early validation that a bunch of the things that we were saying were spot on for what people wanted. Fast forward, and I think this gets to your research question really. Fast forward a couple of months, and we start building out a way for people to sort of onboard onto a wait list, because we're not launched yet. Our devices and our public launch really don't happen until next year in February. But we started saying, hey, are y'all interested? We need to know. We need to understand the size of our market. We need to understand who and why and what. And so little by little, we just started iterating on this thing. And as we did that, we put together sort of a funnel where people could sign up for our wait list. They could start getting some emails about the progress of our development. But right as they signed up, we asked them to take a survey. And it's just shocking to me how many people took the survey, because it wasn't required. You could sign up and not take the survey. But I think all in all, I mean, we got over 1,200 surveys in the course of about 30 days. And this survey was significant. It asked, that's how many people completed the entire survey, giving us this data about what they really wanted, what they cared about, which things were more priority, what they thought about, doing pre-sales and Kickstarters, how comfortable were they, what they wanted from a company, how they were going to feel, how they were going to trust you. We got so much amazing data about what they wanted to see. And we were able to basically see, oh, well, people who are all in and are very certain from the get-go, they don't need as much. But people who are just like, I think I like this, but I'm not so certain. I really am not sure about a pre-sale. They really wanted to know, well, what are you going to, do you have a refund policy? Do you have all these different things? So we learned things about what they wanted in devices. We learned things about how they wanted to be treated and engaged with as an organization. We learned how much, basically how much communication they wanted from us and about what sorts of things. Just amazing information. And at the end, when we were like looking at the percentages of people, we literally had 60 to 70% of the people who signed up for our wait list filling out the survey, completing the survey. So it was fundamental to understanding that this group of people, these women especially, they want to tell us what they want. They want to be heard, and they have a lot to say.
They want to be heard. That's the piece that when you and I have talked about this, what has come out for me the most is how, I don't want to say desperate, but how determined your market, your participants were to have their voices heard and to feel seen. And as you said, as a woman over 40, as a woman over 45, the world doesn't see you. You become invisible. And I wonder what you see in the market because I know you're out there not just doing research on the potential users and community around Cirdia, but around what others are doing in the market as well. And I'm curious, how do you see the market approaching women in that demographic? And I also want to be clear, Cirdia is not a product exclusively for women in that group.
Right.
And at the same time, it is almost a canary in the coal mine when it comes to the very specific, very human issues that Cirdia is helping to address.
Right. Well, it's really interesting. I think that one, it's not hard to go look at anything in the fitness space and see that it's either directed towards weight loss or it's directed towards athletes. It's a big part of it. And when you go a step further, you find, okay, it's even in the way they do tech, so many of them are oriented towards how men think, not how women think. Now, it's not to say all of them, right? Fitbit actually did a good job of making a lot of their devices be something that women wanted to wear, especially early on, and they iterated a lot in the space, and they really brought a lot of great design chops to it. And Garmin does some good work too. But little by little, tech wins. And I say that kind of oddly because you got to get that tech is mostly built by men. And the problems of the tech win over the problems of the people. And what I'm trying to point to there is that the devices are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that they're getting bigger because everybody wants to put everything into them. And you have to have larger batteries, and you have to have larger screens, and you have to have larger, 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 more. We see this with phones. We see this with basically all the smartwatches and all of the fitness devices. This is kind of how it's gone. One of the answers has been to go and build other form factors, like we've seen the Oura Ring and things like that. The thing is that none of them are really thinking about people's data and data privacy when it comes to all of this intimate body data. We're letting everybody collect it. So we'll just set that aside again for just a moment and go back to user experience. It's good in certain ways, but let's talk about the Ring, for example. Works just fine, for a lot of people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever. But people as they age, knuckles tend to get a little bit of arthritis. They tend to get larger. Those big rings are very, very difficult for people as they age. So keep continuing to get that data in that kind of form factor doesn't really work as well. There's other people that it's hard for. If you're doing a lot of weightlifting, rings can be a pain. You tend to take them off, that sort of thing. People tend to take rings off for sleeping because our body changes, with different levels of water in it at different times. I think you were telling me, Liz, about like how you always take off all of your jewelry when you get off on planes similarly. So this is really it's one area of form factor. But the thing about the size and like trying to put every feature in everything. Well, we don't talk to women who want every feature. We talk to women who care about certain features and not others, and they want to know certain things, and they want a lot of information, but they also want to not be bothered, and they want to get away from some of the amounts of screen time that they have. And they also want to not be shamed by their device and be told that they're doing it wrong all the time, which so many of the notifications and so many of the ways that the data is collected and it's basically gamified is basically saying, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. You're not doing it well enough. You're not doing it well enough. You're not doing it well enough. You can do it, you can do it. You're not doing it well enough. It's a crazy cycle. And women are actually exhausted from this cycle. So part of the getting out there and asking, what's important to you? And like putting, making it wide open so they can not just answer some questions that are multiple choice, but also do write-in stuff. We just got so much amazing feedback about, how do we consider the user experience of what actually shows up on the screen? How big do the fonts need to be? How little do they want to see on the screen? Or how much do they want to see on the screen? Then switching back over to the apps that go with this is, Can it be more personalized? Can they get what they want and not have to see what they don't want? Can we skip over a bunch of the things that are just not suited to the way that I relate to my health and well-being? So this is the sort of information that's really been guiding us. And we're really looking at how can you both customize and simplify simultaneously. So we get to that thing again that I tend to be in, which is dealing with tensions between things that look or sound a little impossible to do, but they're really not. It's just where the juice of problem solving lives.
So, in all of your research and talking to users and getting out in the market, what's a preconceived notion of yours or a myth that got busted?
That's a great question. Oh, I'll tell you. Notifications. I imagined that people would be thrilled to have a device that wasn't going to give them notifications. And some people really like that. And a lot of times you can turn off notifications. It's just usually pretty far down in the settings. You have to go searching for it. But what I really found, and I this is probably just telling about me and my life. I always have my phone and my notifications on my phone are just fine. But a lot of women said, I don't care if I'm in the boardroom giving a presentation or if I'm working out at the gym. If my children are calling and trying to get a hold of me, I want to know right away. Or if my aging parents are calling because there's a problem, I want to know right away. And I think this is really like telling about the specific core age group that we were talking to primarily. And like you said, there's a particular era in our lives or time in our lives where women tend to disappear a little bit. And I think this is really one of them when it comes to really addressing the user experience that's wanted versus the user experience that is expected. So that's the one that surprised me the most. And when they told me why, it just made such perfect sense. So obviously that's something we're putting in the device.
I love that because you just described me. I love the fact that I get notifications on my wrist for text messages, direct messages through the myriad messaging apps that I have, as well as phone calls. Because what it allows me to do is leave my phone perennially on silent
Mm.
and then adjust using the different settings in the apps, whether it's favorites or whatever, what it is that I actually get notified for. And so it allows me to be very responsive when I need to be without being tethered to my phone or my desk. And as the mother of a tween and a teen, as the daughter and daughter-in-law of folks who are getting to the stage in their life where they do need me more on call. They need all of us more on call. Knowing that I don't have to get notified for everything. I don't have to have my phone chirping at me, but that I can selectively be notified without then having to explain to everybody else that I'm getting notified. It's, in a sense, it's privacy for me.
It is.
And
Yeah.
I love that. And I also really like having a silent alarm because I tend to get up earlier than my partner on the other side of the bed, and not having my phone blast him awake is appreciated. So, yeah, I see myself in that. It's nice to see myself in your data.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And it's exactly, what you were saying about using haptic versus using sound. And you don't have to show everything on the device. It is small. It's harder to read on a small screen and that sort of stuff, but you can tell people who it is and how it's coming in. And if they've already done the settings the way that you're talking about, which is what we encourage in the onboarding, is like, no, really, just tell us which ones you absolutely want and to receive, and it kind of goes through the ones that you can turn on or turn off, because we all make decisions. We know which apps we expect, notifications from when it's our close family and friends, and versus, the thing that anybody can find us on. And you want to be a little bit more nuanced in the way you get these notifications, because otherwise it just can be overwhelming. And I think overwhelm is the thing that was the theme that women were sharing with us consistently. They don't want to be overwhelmed. They want to just have things work in a way that suits them and accomplishes according to their intentions and their goals.
When it comes to user experience, it is the little things. It's listening for those details and recognizing where you're seeing patterns and then being able to address those things. Because most of the problems that we need to solve in our day-to-day lives aren't massive. They become massive because they're made up of lots of little things. It was like when my children were born and somebody asked me, like, what's the biggest change? I said, there isn't one. There are a million little ones.
Exactly.
And being able to have technology that is centered around you as the user and your needs, to me, that's what we all should be striving for those of us who work in and are engaged in this space.
Totally agree. And it's hard work. I mean, but I love it. And we've got a team with a lot of women on it. And I think this really matters because not a lot of tech companies and startups are like starting with so many women who are the ones asking the questions, considering the strategies, knowing how to ask the questions of other women like us. And like you said before, we're not women only in our scope by any stretch. It's that we're women first. So we're starting with our first device being suited for women, and our second device will work for women and men. And the thing is it's not that the first one doesn't work for men either. It's just that we're designing it with the specific wants for what comes by default as the band. What does the case look like? How does it feel on a wrist that is small? And that's just basically prioritizing how something will suit a woman first. And then we'll have other devices. The thing about the app, though, that I think is going to be really fascinating is that it's going to evolve, too, to deal with lots of different orientations and lots of different sort of how people want to customize to them. But I will say that we aren't going to just suddenly try to be everything to everybody. We don't need to be everything to everybody because there is a massive market that is not being served well right now. And we're really going to focus on, first of all, who already wants something that is not going to have their biometrics be shared, that they will have full control, they will have everything is going to run local first, so it's going to be on their device and on their mobile phone. It doesn't even touch a centralized server. And then we're going to little by little create apps. We're going to be delivering ecosystem apps that will allow you to share it in other contexts with other people the way that you want to. But from the get-go, it's all yours. And you can download it. You can if you're a data geek, you can go assess it. You can go create reports. We'll be providing some of the basics of how does it look over time, just basically look what a really good fitness and biometric app will do for you. All of that's going to come out of the box with what you get. But it really is that you have to customize, but you have to still minimize, like, for whom are you customizing? Because we're not going to try to compete with the Uber athlete applications and Uber athlete devices and wearables that are out there, because I'm not an expert on creating things for, like, the intense bicyclist. I don't do that. And so I don't really have a sense of what their needs are. It would take a lot to like lean into that. We're starting from what we know, and then we're expanding it out as we learn more and more about our core market.
Well, regular listeners of this podcast and any consumers of my newsletter will know that I could just go on and on about data sovereignty and decentralized systems. And certainly I know you and I could. But Mary, I want to get to this. What do you need most right now? And who do you want to be talking to?
Well, we're getting ready to open up our angel round of investment. Actually, we've already started the process. We're doing a 506c, which means we can talk about it, we can market it, we can talk to people about it. And this week we're getting ready to launch our web page that is at cirdia.com/invest. It's not there yet, but it will be in a few days. I don't know what day you're publishing this, but I would say getting the word out to folks who are up to something and up for something different, but that actually meets them where they are. And what I mean by that is we're just like we're doing with our products and our app, we are making our investment vehicle both meet the needs of a company that has to have a governance future that is promised to their stakeholders, but we're also saying, yeah, but we understand you investors and we know you want to make money and you should. You're taking risk on something that's early stage. So we've come up with the right approach, I think, both for somebody who understands the privacy mission and understands that women need and want things that suit them where they are today. So if you know folks that are in the femtech space or folks that are in the privacy spaces that are doing investment, let them know about us. That's really what would help the most right now. We're just starting to do some reach out to folks and in the coming week, and we're kind of hitting start on that button.
Well, let's smash the start button. I am so excited to see where you go, where Cirdia goes, where I know the members of your team. I mean, it's an incredible team. I think that you are really onto something big and important, and not just because I can't wait to be a customer myself. So, Mary, just thank you for your friendship and for being an incredible colleague and collaborator, and for coming along for the ride on this chat. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on here. Thanks for being a partner and scheming on things and sorting things out and, digging into the deep problems with me. It's just been, it's always so much fun. I get so much value out of your engagement and your counsel, and you're just a blast to play with in the world. So thank you, Liz.
Thank you.